How do I possibly begin to describe what makes Alistair such a good romance? My favorite of the entire Dragon Age series, and probably the best romance of all time in any game. I've played a lot of these types of games, and never has anyone come close to matching his charm. Besides maybe Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3, but it's for completely different reasons. They still aren't anything like each other, and you can't really compare them. So where do I start? Do I tell the whole story? Do I tell a short version first and then a long version later? Should I explain everything for those who haven't played, or just talk straight for those who have already seen his romance and are here to reminisce? Or perhaps hear my opinion on the matter? Well, given this romance is a huge part of the story, and given it would probably be a 2-hour-plus movie to go over every bit of dialogue presented in the game, I think it's better to start with a summarized version that assumes you know the majority of the story. Otherwise, we'd be here for a very long time, and in fact, we'll still probably be here for at least 30 or 40 minutes. I might go back and get into the nitty-gritty of it later, but for now, let's talk about the basics and how everything pertinent from the story affects the romance. And to be honest, that intermingling with the story is what makes Alistair's romance so freaking amazing to begin with. As soon as your origin story is over, you meet Alistair on day 1 of your recruitment to the Grey Wardens. You go through the joining, through the Battle of Ostagar, the death of Ferelden's king, and the death of Duncan, as well as any other Grey Wardens on the battlefield that day, leaving you and Alistair as the only 2 remaining Grey Wardens in all of Ferelden. The game has barely begun and already you feel attached to him. He's literally your only surviving compatriot, and you both lean on each other when you reunite outside of Flemeth's hut. Together, you decide to use the treaties to recruit help to fight the coming blight. Not only are you bound by the shared tragedy and the loss of so many, but you're forged together tightly by being the only ones left who can stop the blight. You can't get much better in terms of building a glorious framework for a budding romance than this. The 2 of you are also able to relate over the downsides of being a Grey Warden. When you start having dreams of the Archdemon, Alistair is there to set you at ease and let you know how it's a pretty typical thing to get nightmares after becoming a Grey Warden. He helps you deal with all of it. He's also there to explain what he knows about being a warden, things you wouldn't otherwise know since Duncan has died and you're such a new recruit. Like that the wardens don't usually make it 30 years before they begin to hear the calling and will then retire to the Dark Roads to fight Darkspawn before they're taken over. Sure, a lot of this is a heavy burden to bear, but it's made slightly easier in having someone else to share it with. And if you were to be stuck on a desert island with only one other warden, Alistair is not a bad choice at all. He's good looking with a jaw that could cut through glass, and he's funny.
Just so you know, if the king ever asks me to put on a dress and dance the Remigold, I'm drawing the line. Darkspawn or no. For you, maybe, but it has to be a pretty dress.
Incredibly sarcastic and always trying to make light of topics that might otherwise feel a bit too heavy. One of my favorite things about him is that he's always saying exactly how he's feeling, even if it might sound a little stupid in the process.
Oh, nothing much. I just get to grin a bit and look foolish for a while.
I think that's what actually makes it funny most of the time. There's one in particular that revolves around licking a lamppost.
Never what? Had a good pair of shoes? I'm not sure I do. Have I never seen a basilisk? Ate jellied ham? Have I never licked a lamppost in winter? Make fun of you, dear lady. Perish the thought. Well, tell me, have you ever licked a lamppost in winter?
And no, they're not talking about lampposts. There's something sweet and innocent about the idea of finding out that he's actually a virgin since he was raised in the Chantry. But he's such a good sport about it. I mean, can you imagine when the warden says they've licked their share of lampposts and then some? You know that poor guy had to be blushing like crazy and having to fight through feeling really intimidated.
I'll be standing over here until the blushing stops. Just to be safe. You know how it is.
But he's not always a goofball. Sometimes he says the most beautifully sentimental things I've ever heard, and it strikes you just so because you didn't expect him to say it, and yet there it is. When he brought me that rose, at first I didn't know what to expect. The conversation can start off rather goofy, and then as he explains how he came across it, how he didn't want it to be ruined by the taint, and even better yet, how he wanted to give it to you, I'm just going to play the line because I would never do it justice otherwise.
Is it that easy to see right through me? Huh. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I picked it in Lothering. I remember thinking, how could something so beautiful exist in a place with so much despair and ugliness? I probably should have left it alone, but I couldn't. The Darkspawn would come and their taint would just destroy it. So I've had it ever since. I thought that I might give it to you, actually. In a lot of ways, I think the same thing when I look at you. Oh, wow. She'll never see through that, I told myself. Boy, was I wrong. I guess it's a bit silly, isn't it? I just thought, here I am, doing all this complaining, and you haven't exactly been having a good time of it yourself. You've had none of the good experience of being a Grey Warden since your joining. Not a word of thanks or congratulations. It's all been death and fighting and tragedy. I thought maybe I could say something. Tell you what a rare and wonderful thing you are to find amidst all this darkness.
I remember the first time I saw this scene, I was still smoking back then and went out onto my deck afterwards to have a cigarette. Yeah, I know, bad apple habit, that's why I quit. But it was nighttime and I looked up at the stars and I had to shed a tear because of all the men I had dated, not a single one had ever said something so absolutely perfect to me, so romantic, so meaningful, just amazing. It hit me straight in the heart and I wondered how I'd gone my whole life without hearing those words. And then it hit me again. He's not even real, he's just pixels. Not only is Alistair a romantic SOB, he's also a nice guy with good alignment, although I would be hard-pressed to pick if he is actually lawful good or neutral good, because sometimes even if something sounds pretty awful, like killing Connor for instance because he's possessed during the Redcliffe arc, he doesn't like the idea of the child dying, but since it seems like the only way, he will go along with it. Still, he's always trying to get the best outcome for people and will be really pissed off when you do morally bad things otherwise. Speaking of Redcliffe, when you first arrive there, Alistair will confess to you that he's actually Merrick's bastard son, which means he was King Kaelin's half-brother. This really adds a lot of flavor to the story, whereas your Grey Warden buddy Alistair is suddenly a prince, and here he was just wanting to be treated like everyone else.
Oh, lovely. I'm going to regret this. Somehow I just know it.
Of course my warden had to give him some crap about it. Not long after you find out about his lineage, he'll ask if you guys can stop by to meet a half-sister he found out about. You see, one of the other endearing things about Alistair is that he grew up as an orphan and always felt like nobody wanted him. His mother died during childbirth, or so he thinks, and he was raised by Arleman, whose wife was incredibly resentful to the idea of raising someone who wasn't her own. She also suspected that Alistair was actually Eamon's bastard, and so she treated him pretty poorly. Eventually, he was sent off to become a Templar and did not thrive at all during his time with the Chantry, until finally Duncan came by to rescue him, and he was able to start a better life, one that at least made sense to him. And then what happens? He's finally found acceptance and understanding with Duncan, only to lose him. It really broke my heart how choked up he was about losing such a good friend, but it all ties his story together and it sets the stage for the both of you to become each other's new family. It cements the two of you together in such a beautiful way. It's the very reason why it's never been duplicated in another game, because it's just too perfect. There are so many factors that all roll into the two of you becoming the best romance of all time. I'm getting off track. So where was I? Oh yes. So, After you bring him to meet his sister, it's a shame to see what a rotten wench she is, who just seems to be interested in getting as much of Alistair's money as possible. Afterwards, you have some options to either keep Alistair the way he is, or to harden him, and not in a perverted way either. It just makes him more willing to make his own choices and not simply follow along with what others tell him to do. It affects many outcomes later on in the game and what you can and can't get him to do. Not long after, if you can manage to keep yourself from coming onto him first, he will approach you and confess his feelings for you, telling you that he has come to care for you a great deal, and it's pretty obvious he's worried about what will happen once the blight is over, as in he doesn't want to lose you. He talks about how you guys have been through so much together, and he just wants to know if you feel the same way. I love how even though you know he has got to be scared to death to bring this up to you, he still braves it out. And replying that you already do feel that way about him will net you your first kiss. Woo! Unsure of himself, though, he's already asking if it was too soon. I love telling him you need more practice, as it helps bring out his more confident and playful side. But what's best...
Maker's breath, but you're beautiful. I am a lucky man.
Another line that just gets me right in the heart. I don't know about all you ladies out there, but this is like... so flippin' good I can barely take it. That expression, that voice, that after all these years and graphics being outdated even, that scene still holds up. He still does it for me. How funny is it? I actually went into playing DAO again thinking, my love of Alistair is always going to have a special place in my heart, but it's not that exciting. I've already seen it like 50 times or more. There's nothing new. But every time is like the first time with Alistair, especially if you've waited long enough to forget it just enough. Then it's like an amazing memory that you can actually live out instead of just remembering it. Okay, I'm gushing now, and I seem to recall a lot of people telling me they couldn't wait to see me gush over Alistair. I hope you guys actually meant that, because here I am gushing like Niagara Falls, and that wasn't a perverted joke either, but it could certainly be misconstrued as one. Just covering my bases here. Anyway, so eventually it gets down to the steamy bits, and there are one of two ways this can go down. You can approach him and ask him to spend the night in your tent. His response is a little nervous and awkward, but still fits Alistair's character. Better yet, if you can hold out, he will confront you, and that scene is so much better. He starts off nervous, but then he pulls it together and tells you exactly how he feels. How being near you makes him crazy, but he can't imagine life without you. He talks about how chaotic things were, how even through all of it, he still found himself falling for you.
Being near you makes me crazy. But I can't imagine being without you. Not ever. I don't know how to say this another way. I want to spend the night with you, here, in the camp. Maybe this is too fast. I don't know, but I know what I feel.
It's just so good it gives me chills. Everything he says is perfect here, and the tone, there's really no way to improve on it. If I were on the fence even remotely about whether the two of us should have been together, then this little talk would have completely convinced me. His words are so sincere and thoughtful. I mean, I'm speechless. What more can I say? Afterwards, there is a post-coital scene where you guys get to talk, and Alistair cracks a joke about how he should have been struck down by lightning by now. It's pretty funny, actually, and I love telling him not for that performance, and he doesn't seem to mind taking the compliment. He also lays the big words on you, telling you that he loves you twice if you pick the option to feed your gossiping companions to the Darkspawn. My only complaint is that there isn't more, but you know, there are mods for that, and some very scandalous ones, especially if you want a more detailed scene. But going back to your companions, some of the banter that comes up after the two of you start your romantic relationship really helps to make the whole thing feel more realistic and immersive. One of my absolute favorite lines comes from Wynne. I'll show you the scene as reinterpreted by a mod author, which was actually pretty hysterical.
Why are you smiling like that? You look suspiciously like the cat that swallowed the pigeon.
Canary.
What?
I look like the cat that swallowed the canary.
I once had a very large cat, but not my point. My point is, why are you smirking?
You were watching her, with great interest, I might add. In fact, I believe you were enraptured.
She's our leader. I look to her for guidance.
Oh, I see. So what guidance did you find in those swaying hips,
There are so many good scenes like this, though, even leading up to the romance. It seems one of Alistair's strange hang-ups is confirming with women before asking them advice about women if they are actually female.
No, I mean, pretend you're a woman.
I am a woman, Alistair. That shouldn't be too hard, but I'll give it a try.
So, you're female, Liliana, right?
I am? That's news. When did that happen?
All right, so now that the two of you have become established, you're probably thinking it's all over now, right? Well, you'd be wrong. There's a lot more to this romance. Once you've finished the 4 major story arcs, and your army is assembled, it will be time for the Landsmeet. The Landsmeet is one of those pinnacle scenes that not only makes you feel really integral to the story, because you're deciding what will happen, but in the case of being romantically involved with Alistair, and if you chose to be a human noble, better known as Kuzland, then there are some really awesome things you can do here. You can actually make Alistair king and become his queen if you'd like, which is just so frickin' amazing. I mean, it's incredible, and I remember as soon as I found out this was an option, I rolled Kuzland immediately, and very rarely looked back aside from the time I played a Dalish elf. Still, you can do so many things here, even if you're not a noble, and it's really amazing that the devs gave us so much impact to the story here. It's part of what makes me love this game, and I'm always holding everything else up to the same standard, and am usually sorely disappointed as a result. Of all the things you can do, you can stay a Grey Warden with Alistair and make Honora queen, or even make Honora and Alistair both rule, while you stay his mistress. Heck, you can even side with Loghain and exile Alistair if you want to, but who the heck is going to want to do that? I've never done it to date because I can't bring myself to even experiment with the idea. In my canon, I always make him king and make myself queen. Afterwards, Alistair will talk to you about how he's not only become king, but also engaged in the same day. He goes into depth about how difficult it will be for the two of you to produce an heir, mentioning how every Grey Warden he knew that had children had had them before they actually became a warden. With the future rulers of Ferelden decided, it's now time to face the Darkspawn. The Archdemon has finally revealed itself, and you and Alistair find out what it actually takes to kill one, and why the Grey Wardens are so important. Riordan, the Orlesian Grey Warden, you rescued in House Dungeon, explains that a Grey Warden must sacrifice their very life in order to keep the Archdemon from regenerating its life force into another Darkspawn. That means a Grey Warden must die in order to kill the Archdemon, and since Riordan is the oldest, he takes the burden upon himself, but warns that should anything happen to him, it will be up to either you or Alistair to do it in his place. After hearing the dark news, Morgan awaits you in your room and seems all too prepared to confront you with a proposition. She tells you she can save your life, or even Alistair's, if only you allow her to, well, sleep with Alistair, and that the union will create a child, and that the soul of the old god will go into the child when the Archdemon dies, sparing any Grey Wardens from having to sacrifice their life. That the very reason Flemeth saved you and sent Morgan along with you, it was all to make this very thing possible. And this is probably one of the worst things that BioWare could have done here. It's completely unfair when you consider that a male warden just has to sleep with his own girlfriend, especially if he's dating Morgan anyway. But if you're female, you have to give up your pure and beautiful relationship with Alistair to have him sleep with a woman he can't stand just to keep both of you alive? It really sucks and is my one major complaint in what is otherwise a seamless and perfect romance. It almost feels like because they gave us something so frickin' awesome, they felt the need to tarnish it somehow. I mean, seriously, the whole thing feels sinister and like you're being purposefully misleading even when you talk Alistair into doing it. Like, you know he doesn't want to do it, but you also know it will save his life. And can you imagine, after just having the conversation about having trouble making an heir, you know he will have a child with Morgan, and you're not telling him about it? It feels dishonest, and I imagine Alistair would be the type of person that would really want to know that he did have a child out there. Not even just because he would need an heir as a king, but just because he'd want to be involved in his kid's life. Especially, not having much family of his own growing up. I think over the years I've just gotten used to the whole ordeal. Like, that's just how it was, so I had no choice but to accept it. Like, why were women being singled out to have this sort of drama? Why couldn't we just have our perfect romance and not have to deal with Morgan's grubby mitts on our Alistair? There was one comic I saw a while ago, though. It was called Revelation, I think, and it was a collaboration between David Gator and an awesome artist named Amo. I used to obsess over their art because they often drew Alistair stuff. But anyway, it shows a scene between Alistair and Morgan and makes the whole situation feel a lot more human, whereas Morgan sees the Warden as a friend and knows that her offer of the dark ritual will be devastating, but also knows that it could save their lives. It helps to make it feel more like a necessary evil rather than the awful used feeling you get from thinking Flemeth and Morgan had both planned to do this all along that the main game gives you. Once that whole ordeal is over, you must face the Darkspawn Horde along with the Archdemon, and the armies you've assembled march off to Denerim to attack. Before the battle, Alistair gives this amazing speech that gets you all pumped up to fight, but not long after the battle begins, we see a clip showing Riordan jumping on top of the Archdemon, wounding it quite seriously, but then falling to his death. That means it's up to you or Alistair at this point, and if you didn't allow Morgan's ritual to occur, then either you or Alistair will die. But thankfully, if you did, you will both live through the event. And that battle is glorious, as you conquer the Archdemon atop Fort Dracon, calling in your reinforcements to take it down quickly and then running in to deliver the final blow. A massive light spews out from the Archdemon's body, a sight that everyone in the entire city can behold, and with that, the blight is over and the Darkspawn defeated. At least for now. Afterwards, Alistair is crowned the king, and he then honors your band of adventurers for everything they've done to defeat the Darkspawn. But of course, the hero of Ferelden, who was the very glue that brought everyone together, gets center stage. It's so cool when he presents you as his betrothed and he offers you a boon/engagement present. I always choose to have a monument of the Grey Wardens built because it just seems appropriate. Alistair also gives house lands to the Grey Wardens, which is pretty cool considering they will need to rebuild in Ferelden. You can talk to him again after the cutscene, and I really enjoy the dialogue here where he talks about being so scared to lose you, but you guys made it after all. It's like a shock, right? After this, you can talk to all of your friends, and while normally that's about it besides the epilogue, you can get another mod by Dahlia Lynn that gives you an actual wedding scene with Alistair, which I honestly feel should have been included in the original game. I mean, granted it's one single origin story that could actually see it, but they could have made it so that you could watch Honora and Alistair get married too. Or a male warden and Honora, basically stating, it could have been recycled for other scenes as well. The wedding mod adds such a nice touch and really gave me the extra oomph I was needing that the base game never offered. A simple slide that says we got married 6 months after his coronation is just not enough. I mean, I am being made queen after all here, that's a big deal. After that, Origins is over, and to be honest, whenever I finish this game, I can't help but cry like a little baby, because it's just so sad that it's all over. Most all of your companions are moving on, besides Oghren and Wynn, and you realize you're not going to get to play with the same group of characters again. There's Awakening, where at least you get to keep Oghren with you, but the rest of them, even your own husband has to stay behind and take care of things. So even though I love that you get to pick up being the Warden Commander again and work towards rebuilding the Wardens, it's still bittersweet because it's not with the same people. The most you see of Alistair is a scene at the beginning of Awakening where he stops by for a chat. The scene is a little awkward though, as your Warden kneels before him, even though she is technically supposed to be queen at this point. And even when they say goodbye to each other, he just kisses her on the cheek. Totally ruins the feeling that there should have been there. I could see her maybe bowing slightly as a formality, but full down on her knees? And what's with that peck? They're newlyweds. Can you even imagine them not hanging all over each other? Because I can't. I also really wanted to see my warden actually get to live out her life with Alistair, but considering she is also the warden commander, there is that responsibility for her as well. It's just kind of a bummer from the sappy side of me that wanted to see her be there and living that life with him, you know? That really wraps up the romance from Origins, though, so let's move on to some conclusive thoughts on it all. It's funny how in this game, the romance in the story itself is tied together so tightly. It makes it difficult to talk about the romance without talking about the story, and vice versa. It also makes it very difficult to ever want to step away from that world, and why even in Dragon Age 2 I was dying to meet Alistair again, and in Inquisition I was so happy to find out you could actually meet and play with Alistair if you kept him as a Grey Warden, although it made my choice to let Hawke die all too easy. You also get to meet Alistair's king in Redcliffe, although it always weirds me out how different he looks. I wish they would have at least kept his hair the same, but at least the voice is still the same.
I'm Alistair. It's an honor to meet all of you.
Alistair is like the OG romance for me, though. He was the very first romance I ever experienced in a game, and so in a way he's like my first pixel love. When I was first playing Origins, I had no idea you could even romance anyone in the game. I was like a blushing schoolgirl the first time he kissed me, and it was almost as if I was pointing at my computer screen in shock, talking to some invisible person in the room saying, "He just kissed me." It was like finding something I didn't know I was missing in my life, but then once I found it, I couldn't live without it. The Wardens, Ferelden, Alistair, all of them will always be my favorite in the entire series. Nothing really compares to how perfectly the original story was woven, how integral you were to deciding everything, that even years into the future, you can see the impact of your choices. It's an amazing thing, truly. I'm not gonna lie, I had a bit of a weepy fit over it all once I finished the game again, and now you're going to get to hear a truly nerdy confession. The thing that really touches me about Origins, something that no other game has really touched on in quite the same way for me, is that the storytelling is so superb that it makes me feel like I'm actually there, like I'm actually needed in this world that can't be made right without my help. It pinpoints a feeling that is missing in my everyday life, that desire to be a part of something big, to make a difference in the world, to bring about change for the better, when in reality I have very little power to do anything that matters. The world is running on its own, and there's very little I can do about any of it besides sit back and watch how little control I have of my own future, even of my children's futures. I think a lot of us want more, and living in today's world can really suck. It's stifling, to say the least, and I would give anything to be able to actually be my warden in real life, even with the taint, even with the incredible dangers. And what's great about the game is that it gives you that chance. It gives you the chance to be someone, to make changes, to affect the future of Thetis. The only downside is when it's over and you have to settle for real life again, realizing that you're an impotent pleb. Wow. Well, that got a little too deep and heavy, huh? Sorry about that. Here we were, all gathered to fangirl over Alistair, and I just had to go and ruin it. I do apologize, but I imagine at least some of you can relate to my feelings. It's over for now, but one day in the future, when it's been long enough, I'll load up the game again and be the warden, saving Ferelden from the Darkspawn, and I'm truly grateful to have had that experience as many times as I have, and to know that it will always be there for me to return to. And now I'm tearing up as I'm writing this. So I'm going to try and move on and play the first Mass Effect since the Legendary Collection has come out, and hopefully that will be good enough that it takes my mind off of things. Thanks for taking this big long trip with me through Origins and Alistair's romance. If you have anything to add to what I've already said, have at it. I'd love to know what your favorite canon is for your warden, as well as your best memories in the game. Long live Ferelden, and long live the Grey Wardens. I'll see you guys later. God, I'm such a fucking nerd.